All right, hey, welcome back. Well, we are now, we're in the final stretch, if you will.
Yes, we are. We
This
really
is like
are.
the ninth inning, the fourth quarter, whatever you want to put sports analogy-wise. But
Yeah, unfortunately, the score is like 42-7.
yeah, and both aspects,
Yes.
baseball, football, whatever
Yeah,
the case
it's-
may be,
The Germans are not coming back.
no.
It's a matter of just how does this play out?
And again, where we left off last time, we see again the pushback after the Battle of the Bulge in winter of 44, beginning of 45, and now it's just really that race to Berlin.
Right, which of course Eisenhower calls off almost at the beginning, because during the winter we have the Yalta Conference.
Yes.
And the east of Germany has been ceded to the Soviets.
Right.
By Roosevelt, a sick Roosevelt.
Yes, practically.
He's already been reelected in November.
Correct, but he's within months of his death.
And when you see the videos and stuff
Oh my
of
goodness.
Yalta, he definitely looks like he's close. I mean, I had hospice patients that looked healthier. Honestly, he just looked bad.
Well, his eyes are very sunken in, bags
his
that are just
energy
completely, and he can barely move. You're right.
Yeah. It's Stalin and Churchill are moving around, and he's just there.
He's just sitting there like,
Yeah, it's very sad.
It is. It is
very
sad,
sad.
unfortunate. But again, you also realize he's been in office since 1932.
And he's not young.
No, he wasn't. He wasn't really that young when he got elected in the first term.
And he was sick already. He had
Correct.
polio.
He had
much
polio.
earlier.
Right.
He has polio as an adult, though, didn't he?
He had it. Yes, he got it. Around his mid-20s, maybe early 30s. He started developing those symptoms. So by the time he got into the candidacy of the 32 election, it's already.
Well, it was already.
It already had
He's
set
definitely
in.
he's definitely the example that if we would have had TV, he would never have been elected.
Oh, for sure. No, because
Despite what people think about disabilities, when they're voting for a president, they want somebody who's strong and capable.
correct. Well, think of just like the 1960 presidential election.
Oh yeah,
You know,
I mean, Mr. 5 o'clock Shadow versus strong, young, strapping JFK.
Who tanned and wore makeup.
Yeah,
Right. Nobody, and
Yes.
again, getting a little off topic, but the
Yes.
idea again, when you see a president like Roosevelt, who he has a deal, essentially a deal with the press,
yeah,
to say, don't photograph me in my wheelchair.
right.
They knew he was sick. They knew he had polio. He would do it in public settings where he would be sitting in his car. And he would have a specially made car where he would press buttons for the acceleration and the deceleration.
Or he'd be at a podium where he'd be
Correct.
holding on.
Right. Or he'd stand next to a person that was bigger and taller than him,
Yes,
to where he could lean on them a little more.
yes. Which is amazing considering so many of the papers were owned by Republicans.
Correct.
That this was a nod and a handshake kind of deal.
Correct,
It wasn't
yes.
some sort of conspiracy, unless it came out of the whole press.
Right.
It was that this doesn't matter. His candidacy doesn't matter whether or not he can run a 50-yard dash.
Exactly. And that, I think, is the thing, because again, you're talking for the last 3 elections, you've had Republicans dominating.
Oh yeah.
And look where that got them.
Well, you end up with ignoring the politics part of it, you end up with an economic catastrophe that was coming no matter what.
Correct.
If a Democrat would have been elected in 1928, they
It
would have been
wouldn't
the
have
ones blamed.
Right.
So, but the thing is that's not how people react. Unfortunately,
No.
people vote like peasants in the Middle Ages.
Exactly.
If it rained too hard, it's the king's fault.
Correct.
If the economy sagged, it's the president's fault, even if he's only been in office for a minute and a half.
It doesn't matter.
It's
It
his
doesn't
fault.
matter to them. They are the scapegoat because they're the head of the government.
Yes.
And okay, not the head of the government, but they're the head of the executive branch, and the executive branch is the one that ultimately makes the decisions, right?
But in American thinking today, especially,
Just
they
for
are
sure.
the head of government.
For sure.
But yeah, we're way off topic there.
So we're now into the Yalta Conference again. 1945. Yes. It was right around the beginning, or was it late 44 when they had that Yalta Conference? I couldn't remember exactly.
I know it was winter.
Yes. Okay.
And Yalta's of course, in the
Yalta's,
Crimea.
yes, right. And so because again, they're in their winter clothing.
But I mean, Yalta's the warm spot in the Soviet Union.
That's true. It is a resort.
Sad.
It is definitely the resort location on the Black Sea. Weird.
And they're wearing. Now, what Roosevelt's wearing doesn't matter, but Churchill's wearing heavy coat and a hat too, so it's obviously chilly.
Yeah, so it was in February of 1945. So yes, definitely chilly.
Yes.
You're still in that grip of winter in most of the northern hemisphere. So but again, this is now setting up what to do after the war. You know, again, how are we going to deal with the situation in Germany? Because we know they see the writing on the walls.
And the war, again, we talked about at the end of the last time. When you have the initiative, you're going to win.
Correct.
If you can keep it.
Correct.
And the German army, because of the loss of that reserve, no longer can choose the battles. And so when the Allies start crossing the Rhine, first at one place and then at two or three others, the last big airborne drop, which is kind of a fiasco, but then again, all of them are kind of fiascos.
Right.
But it allows, once again, a springboard over a river or whatever. They pave the way to better success.
Yes.
And now it's just a drive. I know we drove to Prague, Czechoslovakia, liberated Prague in, I want to say April or May.
Somewhere very close to the end of the war, yes. But the thing is a lot of these Western allies, the French, the British, the Americans that are pushing more towards the eastern side, closer to what was really the cutoff point? I can never really remember what the cutoff point between West Germany and East Germany was. I don't know.
Elbe River.
The Elbe
River. It's pretty much the border of what becomes East Germany.
Okay.
But we go south of that. Into Czechoslovakia.
Correct.
I don't believe we ever got into Hungary. I know the Soviets took that.
They did, for sure.
Of course, those countries start flipping.
Correct. Well, and again, that's how can we put it? That's kind of the puppet mastery of the communist state.
When you're looking at it, if you're a Romania, you have no capability of resisting the Soviet Union.
Of course not.
On your own, and the Germans are running.
Yeah, they've fled
and so,
very quickly.
Well, I think it was Mihail, which is Michael, basically. Their king flees to the west. I think he goes to Italy or something like that.
Wouldn't surprise me.
And a communist government takes power because that's they know nothing else is going to be acceptable to Uncle Joe.
Well, sure, and I mean, again, you have the quote unquote power vacuum. Once the Germans leave, once the king leaves, who's there to take over?
But it prevents what happens in Poland and East Germany from happening in Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary.
True.
You don't have the utter devastation that you do.
Oh my gosh.
Where the Germans fought to the end. Because these countries know that they're going to be destroyed. And they don't have a lot.
No, they don't.
I mean, Romania outside the Plesty oil fields it's a very agrarian nation. So you destroy that and they don't have any wealth.
Correct.
So they, in the sense of self-preservation, they made the right choice.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. Again, so you have an oppressive dictator as your leader for the next 50.
Well, you're going to have it no matter what you decide.
Whether you want it or not, you're going to have it.
We saw too back in August. As we were breaking out and running across France, the Soviets are already in Poland and the Warsaw Uprising. The Jews in Warsaw rise up. Not just Jews.
But your political...
There were some Poles, too.
Correct.
But the Jews really were the central focus. The Jewish ghetto in Warsaw.
Correct.
And Stalin shows exactly what Eastern Europe's going to look like. He lets them be pounded flat by the Luftwaffe and what's left of the Luftwaffe and the Wehrmacht. Just absolutely destroy. That uprising takes 2 months, but it's just absolutely brutal.
And the worst thing is how, as these soldiers are moving both westward on the Russian side or the Soviet side, and eastward on the American and British side, the differences between the two.
Yes.
The major differences. Again, it's rightfully so, as easily understood as you could for a post-war initiative.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we've talked about this before. The fact that, again, the Germans come into Poland, they come into Western Russia, they come into other parts of the Russian or Soviet territories, and they just destroy everything.
Oh, I mean, of course, you got the Einsatzgruppen running around,
Correct,
snatching up people, executions in mass numbers.
right.
Which, you know, unfortunately for like the Ukrainians, is, you know, just
par for the course.
different day, same government.
Right.
I mean,
right.
Somebody shooting us.
We got shot by we have a famine that takes place under the Soviets. Oh wait, the Russians or the Germans come in. Oh, they start shooting us. Damn.
Start shooting the Jews. Well, you know,
I guess that's just
what we're going to do.
Right.
The Homodor.
But again, the idea is, of course, that once these Germans start to move further back towards their home state.
Yes,
and what the Russians
push through southern Germany, especially.
Correct. What the Soviets will do to these individuals are just unbelievable.
I guess the biggest concerning spot would be the lack of discipline.
Sure.
But really, the troops were given carte blanche to do to the civilians whatever they felt like it, and of course, you'd be hard pressed to find somebody in the Soviet Army hadn't lost 2 or 3 people they knew.
Right.
So revenge is high on their mind, and they know their female relatives have been raped, so they pass it on.
Yes.
Ancestry.com should be a nightmare to do in Eastern Germany.
I would assume so. Yes.
Because you got tons of Russians, and unfortunately to say, I mean, that's human history, really.
Yeah.
So I guess the offense to the senses is that we are supposed to be more civilized now. I know this is 70 years ago, but the idea that this is still going on as part of warfare, well, welcome to the Eastern Front.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just been this barbaric since the word go, and since Stalingrad has been worse.
Exactly.
Which was hard to imagine.
Very, very good point. Very good point.
Hard to imagine how horrible, and as they move west and as we move east into southern Germany especially, we discover even something more barbaric.
Oh my gosh, it's unbelievable what we see.
The thing. And then there's been several good movies and episodes of like Band of Brothers that talk about the discovery of the concentration camps. They're just absolutely nightmarish. The concept. And I know, at least from reading, that a lot of people in high command, because they had access to these reconnaissance office photos,
right,
and you had spy reports, that these concentration camps existed. Now, the concentration camps came into being a month after Hitler was elected at Oranienburg outside Berlin. But that was for political prisoners to start with.
Yes.
But then that enemies of the state expands pretty rapidly.
Well, you have so many different groups of people who are being categorized. And not only just your Juda or your Jews.
Right.
But you also start to see, again, many of your physically handicapped individuals.
Right. They don't usually go to the concentration camps. They go straight to the showers.
Correct.
I mean, they don't waste any time. I know when we went to Dachau, that was the thing that hit Kim, my wife.
Sure.
Because she's legally blind. That would have been her destination. She
Right.
was defective as far as the Nazis were concerned. They're building a master race.
They don't want someone who's blind. They don't want somebody who is suffering from,
well, polio.
Right,
even.
polio.
I mean, you're crippled because of polio.
Good one. Or maybe if you have a drop foot or something along the lines that makes you have a limp.
What was the big one that you tested for at school? Scoliosis.
Yes, scoliosis.
If you had a severe scoliosis, you're gone.
Right.
And for the Nazi ideology, it's a twofold thing. One, they're trying to build this master race, and master races aren't crippled.
No.
In any sense.
Of course not.
And two, in their concept that everything is for the glory of the state, you're draining resources from the state.
Yeah.
For someone who's not productive.
Right. Right.
And I mean, that's 2 strikes you're out.
Yeah.
I
For
mean,
sure.
1 strike really.
Right. Right.
But I mean,
for one group.
but when you look at their ideology,
yes,
depending on who you talk to in the Nazi Party who's making these decisions, one or the other of these is going to be the reason they give
sure,
for eliminating these undesirables.
right. And again, it's not. Again, it's more than just even your physical or mentally handicapped individuals. It's also those who are the Roma or Gypsy
for
groups of individuals
who are. And of course, I don't know anything. I mean, we don't have gypsies / Roma, whatever you want to call them,
right
in America. I mean, obviously we do. They live here, but they're not traveling in caravans.
No,
or anything of the tradition.
No.
But just the idea that they were hated so much, it seems so strange to me. But then again, I don't know anything about that time.
Correct.
As far as actually living in it.
Correct.
I can read all the history I want. To me, it seemed like, they would be a break in a dullness of living life between planting and harvest. That you'd have these people come and do entertainment and dancing and something different.
Yeah.
To look at as opposed to your neighbor and your donkey. But of course, with them become all the rumors of sexual scandal, and theft, and things like that. But that again, we've talked about that, the otherness.
Yes,
they're not us, so they're bad.
They must be
dealt
with.
How many of these sexual scandals were just people being people?
Right.
But then, she turns up pregnant.
Yeah. Oh boy.
And got to blame it on somebody.
Of course, it was her. She did it. She seduced me.
Except for Hans back there with a big grin on his face.
Yes.
He's the one that did it. They're just blaming it on the Roma.
Correct.
They weren't even involved.
Right.
But he can blame it. They can blame it on somebody else.
Correct.
But this otherness, and that's what starts filling out this camp.
Yes.
You see the Roma, one of the first groups, besides communists.
Yeah, well,
that started getting piled into these camps.
Right.
And then, of course, Democrats also get piled into these camps because they're political prisoners.
Yes.
Homosexuals. The master race cannot be gay.
No, of course not. Anyone, again, we talk about it. Anyone who is not blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
Well, that's a stretch because none of the leadership of the Nazi Party was blonde.
You're right. But let's be honest, doesn't matter. Heck,
no, but that's what their goal was. I mean,
correct.
They didn't. In their ideology, we have to give them a little credit. We make fun of the blonde-haired, blue-eyed. That was their ideal, but that wasn't their expectation.
Sure.
Because there was a lot of my grandfather. Had quite a bit of German. I didn't get it somehow, but whatever. But I mean, when I see pictures of him, he looks like he's an Italian. Very, very dark, very tan, very swarthy.
Yeah, yeah.
So you're kind of like, huh?
Maybe Southern German.
Maybe
Probably.
Kind of little Italians running around.
Maybe.
But we'll give them a little credit, but it's their propaganda that caused this whole problem anyway. So they don't get much credit.
No, but again, the idea of you want. If you are not what they expected, if you are not what the Nuremberg laws put into play.
That was 35?
Correct.
And that was 1/8 Jewish blood?
Mm-hmm. Then you're done. You're gone. You're out.
You can't, you won't be able to hold a job.
No, you can't.
Especially not a professional job.
Of course not.
Teacher, lawyer, judge.
Doctor, anything.
And because of the way the history of Europe works, that was a lot of the professions that Jews had gone into because they weren't allowed to stay anywhere for very long. 2 or 3 generations at most. And then the king would have borrowed too much money and then kick him out.
Yeah.
So he didn't have to pay.
Right.
But that means you had to start going after career fields that didn't require property.
Yeah.
You just need a shop or an office. That's all you need. You don't need a farm or something like that.
It shows kind of the evolution of much of Eastern and Western Europe.
Well, it's kind of funny that in a lot of ways, anti-Semitism caused the stereotype that anti-Semites use, that they're all doctors and lawyers and professors.
Correct.
And it's true because they had no choice.
Yes, exactly.
If they wanted to feed themselves, they had to have a job they could carry with them.
Right, exactly. But again, we see it all. We see it all along. We see it all over the place. The fact that again these others are being mistreated.
And in Eastern Europe especially,
right,
Jews were much more visible. They dressed differently.
Right.
It's kind of like living in an area with Amish.
Yes,
You see them immediately, you know they are Amish.
because most of the Eastern Orthodox Jew is the Hasidic Jew, the ones that are having the curls. I can't remember exactly what
They got a name, and I
can't remember
think
what
of it
the
either.
name is, but they have the curls as the sideburns. They wear the hats, the flat brimmed hats. They wear the traditional clothing.
Yes.
German Jews,
Much more assimilated.
correct. Even French and Italian Jews are not going to be wearing the traditional garb. They will, of course, attend synagogue. They will have the remembrance of the Sabbath day, but they won't go that far.
They definitely don't fit into the stereotype of German propaganda.
No, they don't have the big
super
nose.
hook.
Oh my
And
gosh.
which means, of course, in Western Europe, you don't see the absolute devastation of what becomes known as the Holocaust.
Correct.
Because people are able to hide,
Oh,
able to
easily.
further assimilate.
Easily.
And, of course, in places that are occupied, there's no reason to cooperate.
Right.
Especially, like, say, southern France.
Right.
Southern France don't... It's like the Jews, we don't have any of those.
What do you mean? We don't have. Why would they come here?
Well, there's a synagogue. They left.
Right.
What's that guy living right next door?
No, I don't know.
He's a plumber.
Yeah. Something.
I mean, the I guess the subtle resistance of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
You don't turn people in because you don't want to. You might not even like a Jew as a Frenchman,
Right.
but you hate the Germans more, and so
Right.
you don't do anything to help
Exactly.
them. And
Exactly.
so, but you have the Nuremberg laws, which change German. This is also where you see the split, where the Nazi Party becomes so preeminent
Yes.
that when America comes in, there's no way to get rid of everybody who's in the Nazi Party, because to even hold a teaching job as a kindergarten teacher, you have to be a member of the Nazi
Correct.
Party.
Correct. You wanted to be a doctor, you had to be a member of the Nazi
All
Party.
lawyers and judges had to be Nazi
Everyone.
Party members.
It was. It's very similar to modern understanding of Western political ideology. If you want to hold any position of authority, you must be a part of some political party.
Yeah.
But we just
You don't see a lot of independent judges nominated
No.
anywhere because you have to become political to get further than local judge.
correct. And again,
Yeah, you're right.
but when we see, of course, with the Germans, is they take it one step further and they ban every other political party minus the Nazis, and that even took place 1933.
Well, 33. I mean, as soon as they get there,
As
they
soon
ban
as
the
it gets in.
commies,
Right.
like immediately.
Yes.
But then even the Social Democrat Party is banned by 35.
Which is very close to that Nazism,
I mean, they're
but not
they're
close
what, a
enough.
center-left party?
Yes.
Because they're the largest socialist party in the world at the time.
Yes.
So they're not like, rabid eye reactionaries.
No. But again, they're not.
They're not Nazis.
They're not Nazis, and so we have to get rid of them. But it's again after the Nuremberg laws.
Then Kristallnacht comes.
Then Kristallnacht comes. Then we start to see some of those mass deportations.
Well, with Kristallnacht, you start seeing, first they're excluded from the economy.
Correct.
And with Kristallnacht, you start seeing them being excluded from society.
Yes.
With violence.
Right.
Mass deportations. I mean, obviously, Kristallnacht's the attacks.
Right.
But then the mass deportations. Get out of our country.
Correct. And it's almost as a twofold deportation. You have to realize people are going to leave just because of the fact that they're being attacked.
Well, they don't have a job anymore.
Correct. They need to go and
Einstein.
find some. Right. Great point.
Best example. I
Great
think
point.
really right
Einstein.
off the top.
Right. Being a German Jew, he had to.
But he was a professor.
So
Not
what?
anymore.
Nope. So what? He's a theoretical physicist, and he discovered the theory of relativity.
Mm-hmm.
He immigrates into the United States, which, unfortunately, just like any other nation in the world, we didn't really need much of these Jews running around, or not even Jews in particular, just people from other nations.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there exists in a lot of different places a level of anti-Semitism. I personally don't get, but there
Right.
it's you can't deny that it's there. It's hard for me to understand because, well, I've known Jews my whole life.
Sure.
I've gone to school with them. I don't really think.
You don't think anything of them.
No,
as a
they're just
different-
my neighbors.
Right.
I don't really think about them. But that's me living out here. There's There wasn't a large community of Jews in St. Joe. I mean, it was a pretty small group.
Mm-hmm.
But, I mean, my dad worked with several of them. And I remember I bought my first board game from one.
There you go.
You know, they ran a small shop downtown. But anyway, this difference idea is there. And of course, it doesn't matter what immigrant. In American history, you can just find any immigrant group and you can find nasty propaganda about them.
Exactly.
I mean, literally, Irish, German, Italian, Greek,
Chinese,
Chinese,
for sure.
You literally have laws passed against Chinese.
Yes, the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Exactly. I mean,
you know,
so,
that was on the books up until 1940.
And we are in the middle of a depression.
Correct. We don't need more people.
We don't need more people. So when they say that, you know, America colluded or whatever you want to use, collusion is a big fancy word now. It's a buzzword.
You cannot say that they collaborated with the Germans.
It wasn't like they wanted
out.
the Jews to be killed.
No.
But they didn't want any immigrants at all. And so therefore, why would they make an exception?
Right.
I guess because you see a lot of Jews getting turned away from South American countries, even
Cuba.
Cuba
couldn't allow any Jew because it was the SS St. Louis. The boat that was holding about 900, I believe, 900 Jews that were being deported from Germany. And they tried their best to get them into
couldn't find
anywhere.
A home. Yeah. Nobody let them in.
Nobody would let them in. And they were in Havana Harbor for a good week and a half or 2 weeks or somewhere around
I know
there.
they made a tour of the Caribbean.
Uh-huh.
Where was it? One of the islands. It was Dutch originally.
Probably
Trinidad?
Could be.
It had the largest synagogue early in America.
Aruba?
No, it was one of the closer to South, like right off the coast of South America. So probably Trinidad and
Tobago. Okay.
Had the largest synagogue in the New
Western
World.
Hemisphere.
Real fast. I mean, 1600s kind of
wow,
early.
that's very
early. Earlier, because a lot of the Jews moved from the Netherlands, saw an opportunity for a new world, new start.
Wow, very similar to any religious group.
Yes, yes. But all that being said, we have this desire. The Germans have a desire to kick them out. Which is twofold bonus.
Yes.
One, got rid of the Jews.
Yes.
They don't want them here.
Right.
Two, confiscate property.
Yeah.
That's a lot of money.
Oh, yes.
And of course, with positions opening.
Right.
You know, obviously there's an opening for a theoretical physicist.
Of course.
I can't remember what university he was in, but
yeah.
But anyway, you can give this to one of your friends,
mm-hmm.
or you can influence somebody that you want to impress, like another Heisenberg. I mean, he was already his own big guy, but you know, you find somebody who's already a theoretical physicist, you put him in charge there, he owes you a favor.
Correct.
That's how these dictatorships work, without fail, really.
Right.
Communist, Nazi, fascist, whatever.
Mafia.
Yeah, mafia, really, for that matter. I mean, that's kind of how they work, don't they?
Yeah.
But as the war progresses, it kind of goes on the back burner.
Right.
39, 40, 41 even.
Right.
But in 39, they take Poland.
Correct.
And so they ghettoize the Jews. Now, it wasn't as hard as we would think by grabbing all the Jews who live in Lodz, Poland, and putting them in one neighborhood, because most of them already lived in the same neighborhood.
Because they were forced.
Well, I mean, even if you came to New York City.
Yeah.
There were whole sections of New York City that was basically, if you knocked on a door, a Jew answered.
Well, that's what I mean. They are almost in a way
ghettoized.
They're putting themselves into those areas because they're familiar with the people. They may even come from the same. They may have come from the same village and moved to the city together, or within the generation. Maybe even intermarry.
That's how there's a Chinatown.
Right.
I mean, it's the idea that there's a place you can go, you can speak your native language.
Right. You can practice your religious
practice your
beliefs.
religion because you know it. You don't have to go build your own synagogue.
Right.
It's already there.
Yeah.
And that's a comfort thing. So when they round them up, I'm not saying it was right. I'm just saying it was probably a little easier than it would be today.
Yeah, right.
They wouldn't be spread all over the city.
Yes.
And Warsaw and Lodz have, of course, huge populations of Jews, and that are rounded up.
Yes, they do.
And they have their own little government.
Right.
They have their own police, which don't get a good name among Jews.
Of course not.
Because they're considered, one, collaborators. But then the Germans are like, we've got to settle the Jewish question.
Right.
Because Eastern Europe had a lot of Jews.
They did.
The Ukraine, Belarus, Western Russia, just lots and lots of Jews. And I think it's just because of the emptiness, maybe.
I,
Jews migrate there, and they can have a village, and nobody bothers them because nobody lives 20 miles in any direction.
correct. and again, most of that area of, well, and it takes it back even further in history with the Russian Empire.
Yeah.
A large amount of the Russian Empire, of course, Western Russia had quite a few Jewish population. They moved them into areas, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine. It was, I believe, if I remember correctly, it was called the Plain of, oh gosh, the name is going to escape me, but it's literally just a place where a large number of Jews were congregated.
Just settled.
Correct.
Because they were very
that's it, the Plain of Settlement. That's exactly it.
They were very loyal to the Tsar.
Correct.
Which becomes a tradition in Jewish life. When you look at the politics of Jews in different countries, they tend to favor strong central governments.
Exactly.
Because just historically,
It's
central
helped
governments tend to protect them better than having a republic like we would.
Yes.
So, but anyway, it's in the winter of 1942, 41, February 42. There's this gathering of the, not the upper echelons. I'm not sure Himmler was even. I mean, I'm sure he was there, but I'm not sure he was there for the whole thing.
No, I don't believe he was.
But you have these guys like Reinhard Heydrich, who is evil.
Yes.
Son of a bitch.
Yes, and again, a lot of these other mid-level officials.
They're of the SS.
Correct.
I found this on the web.
Of the home, basically the interior ministry. How are we going to settle this? Because we need to get rid of them. They're taking up space. They're taking up materials, and we don't want them. And because we've conquered all this territory, we have nowhere to send them.
Right.
We can't just push them over anymore.
Right. Because we're pushing into other countries that we haven't taken yet.
Right.
Well,
and
we're planning on.
We need to solve the solution. Now, the initial solution was the Einsatzgruppen.
Right.
Literally, death head guys running around,
Kill squads.
Killing people, in lack of a better terms, in retail fashion.
Right.
Small groups. Eventually, they start using trucks. They put them in the back a trailer, and they vent the exhaust, and they drive around the countryside until they're dead.
And unfortunately, they turn pink.
Yes.
The bodies because of the carbon dioxide.
Yes.
Or sorry, carbon monoxide.
Yes. Carbon monoxide. But yes.
But you also have to take into consideration that it's a lot more resources to kill these men.
Well, it takes a lot of time too. And because you can't get rid of whole villages in a single whack.
Right.
Resistance.
Right.
And unfortunately for them, despite their strong jawline of all their propaganda posters, Germans, even the Nazis, are people.
Yes.
And you don't have to look real hard to see that the people you're killing are people.
Correct. Doesn't matter if they're Jew, doesn't matter if they're
And
whoever.
so even if you believe in what you're doing, trying to create a Herrenvolk and establish Germany's place as its rightful masters of the universe or whatever they are, you're killing people, and it takes a toll.
Right.
And the problem is the suicide rate among these Einsatzgruppen gets to levels that is unsustainable.
Correct. I mean, it's
so we've got to solve this problem.
Yeah. The final solution.
Yep. This conference, if you ever get to see the movie Conspiracy.
Loved it. It was
eerie.
Very.
Because it's all very calm, it's a business meeting.
Right. It's a board meeting.
With drinks and snacks and
hey, we're gonna have a smoke and we're gonna drink some nice whiskey or French wine or whatever the case may be.
While we're doing that, we're gonna discuss the murder of 1 million people.
Oh yes, and
as just a common table conversation.
And that's the thing. They bring it. They even have research. They brought it down to the bare number.
Yes.
How many they could get in an hour's time to be killed, and moving on and saying, okay, by 1 year they were going to kill over 1 million or 2 or whatever the case was.
Well, because again, the way they were doing it was retail.
Correct. These are the numbers.
At the rate, they weren't hardly denting the birth rate.
Sure. We've got
This isn't a solution.
No.
We've got to do something bigger, because the way we're doing it, it's never going to end.
No, of course
the
it
Jews
won't.
will always be here, and that's not something they would found acceptable. So they come up with the camps. The death camps.
Right, not the
concentration camps. Been around. They're all over Germany.
Well, concentration camps have been around for many, many years
Well,
before Nazi Germany.
Well, yeah, the British technically invent them as prisoner of war camps in the Boer War.
Sure.
I mean, that's where the term first gets used.
Right. I mean, even the Spanish had them in Cuba. They had concentration or relocation camps.
Yep. I mean, really, in a lot of ways, there's not much difference between that and a reservation.
Correct.
It's just bigger.
Right.
The reservation got a little bit more room.
Yeah.
But it's useless land that you can't grow anything on.
Exactly. So now you must be,
right,
sponging off the government. But
yeah.
Anyway, the concentration camp move to death camp is really it is
the final solution.
It is the final solution. Exactly.
We're gonna grab sometimes 2,000 or 3,000 people and put them on a single train. And we're going to just cram them in there. We don't care whether they survive the trip or not, because the ultimate goal is to kill them anyway.
Right.
So you don't really worry about damaged goods.
No. If half your train car load dies while on transport, well, okay, that's less people that we have. Yeah, that's less time and less people that we have to deal with.
And you bring them to a concentration camp, an Auschwitz, a Sobibor,
a Treblinka.
Dachau, surprisingly enough, is not a death camp. It's a concentration camp.
Okay.
It's designed for work. I mean, they had a death chamber.
Right.
But they never went into the wholesale reduction of population until the very end of the war when they're trying to get rid of the evidence.
Yes, of course.
But
it's
most of the death camps that are fully functional are in Poland.
Right. If you were to pull up a map and you were to just go to Google and search Nazi death camps, there would be most of them. I think maybe of the dozen that are actual death camps, I believe 10 of them are in
what
Poland.
Was Poland? The general government.
Right.
But I mean, obviously, Auschwitz is the crown jewel.
Is the one. Auschwitz.
It's got 8 lines of trains.
Yes.
I mean, it's like a whole big loading, and this is where you come into that question. Aerial reconnaissance showed this.
Right.
And so some of the higher ups in the American government knew that they existed, but when you read, I mean, obviously most of these things didn't come out. Their knowledge of it didn't come out until after the war.
Of course.
So they had time to process when they wrote their autobiographies, or other people wrote their biography, or they did interviews.
Right.
But the biggest thing that comes out of most of those interviews, they just couldn't believe anybody would do that. They just didn't understand what really was going on, despite the evidence right there in their face. But this is something so monstrous. We don't have any examples from human history. The closest thing we get to this is like the Mongols.
That's true.
Building pyramids of skulls.
That's true.
I mean, we just don't have anything to compare the idea of industrialized murder.
Yes, I mean, and that's the thing. We've been through war. We've
savage wars.
Right, savage, beastly wars, but we've never had something on the scale of this. And so when you see an average GI stumbling on a patrol through the forest onto a camp,
one of the subsidiary camps,
right, where these men are behind barbed wire.
Who are barely functional.
They are walking skeletons, physical walking skeletons.
They're surviving on 800 to 900 calories a day,
whereas
being forced to labor.
Correct. Whereas we are on an average daily allotted value is what,
1,600 for females, 2,000 for males.
2,000 for males, and and that's not working like what these men had to do.
Survival.
Correct.
And once you fall, the interesting thing is a lot of really interesting data about starvation comes out of these death camps.
Of course.
Because the Germans don't want to waste anything.
No, of course not. They want to
find that when if you, for an extended period of time, go below 1,200 calories a day, you start losing, I guess, emotion.
Oh.
It's probably the best way to put it.
Okay.
You just don't have the energy to waste on superfluous emotions.
Makes sense. You want to survive, your body goes into survival mode.
I think in a lot of ways, probably long-term, a blessing for some of these people who survived those camps is that their brains were too numbed to emotionally respond to what was going on. They saw it.
Of course.
And I'm sure it's still in their nightmares.
Of course it is.
But that maybe the full brunt of it didn't occur to them because they were starving to death. That's the only thing I can hope for them.
Right.
Is that they, you know, maybe that helped them in that way. It's not like it was a plan.
It's just the way that the body worked.
It's the way the body works. And it's, yeah, very terrifying to think about. But, you know, when they really got moving, it was, well, they may eventually killed, what, I don't know how many of the death camps total to kill. I think it was about 11 million. Around
Roughly.
6 of them being Jews.
Yes.
A little less than 6 because you got all the death camps, or the death squad things.
Correct.
That get to add to that total
Correct.
of 6 million Jews.
Yes.
But Slavs,
right.
They just started killing Russians like crazy, which is Sobibor, the only camp to get shut down before the end of the war because a mass escape.
Oh.
Good movie.
Yeah.
There's 2 movies about it. One with Riker Hauer that I saw, and then there was a newer one that I have not seen. But basically, it was a Jewish death camp, but then they brought a bunch of Russian soldiers into it. Big mistake.
Yeah.
Because the guards for these camps, not going to be the guys you want to fight soldiers with. They're cops at best.
Yeah.
Most likely mall cops. I'm honest. I mean, look at the people they're bringing in are women. Men who've been basically beaten into submission already.
Correct.
By the time they get to the camps, there's not a lot of fight left in people. They're just trying to survive at this point.
Right.
So, you know, you don't have to be super vigilant. Because, you know, it's like a zombie movie watching these people try to move because they just don't have the energy or the muscle mass left to move with any sort of speed.
Right.
And then, of course, as the war turns bad, especially as the Soviets start moving into these camps in Poland, it becomes obvious that the Germans are doing something that's never been done before. I mean, the gulags are bad, but this is so much further beyond that.
Again, this is systematic killing. This is systematic mass extermination of a race.
Well, of races.
Right.
Roma, Jew, Slav, homosexual, communist.
Anyone that was seen as an inferior or other individual.
Or an enemy.
Right.
And the amazing thing is that not too many Americans ended up in those places.
Thankfully.
Or British, for that matter.
Well,
they were usually put in the Stalags, which are a different group. But, I mean, I know there were Americans at Bergen-Belsen.
Sure. But, you know, the funny thing is there are American Jews who are fighting in World War II for the Americans. You know, and they're stumbling upon these death camps, and I'm sure they're just appalled at what is going on. But, again, the idea of what is going on is also it's just so much to try and take in. I mean, I know you've been to a concentration camp before. Obviously, I have not had that opportunity, but I'm sure even in 2023, it's still a very tragic experience.
It's overwhelming in the enormity of it.
Right.
I mean, I was at Dachau, so not a full death camp, but still, you know, on our tour we saw a ton of presentations on the Holocaust.
Of
to
course.
The point where you almost became numb.
I'm sure.
It was just overwhelming at a certain point. You've seen it, the pictures over and over, and the stories. But it reduces. To me, the Holocaust alone is one of the reasons that World War II is always something that modern filmmakers and writers revisit, because there's no ambiguity. The bad guys, we know who they are.
Right.
And we know that basically, despite the fact that we say that might doesn't make right and the ends don't justify the means, really there wasn't anything we wouldn't be willing to do to stop that.
Exactly.
So, and we'll see that same argument coming up when we talk about the Pacific War as well.
Oh my goodness, yes.
But, you know, as things come to an end, the Germans start trying to hide it, mainly by getting rid of the people as quickly as they possibly can. And if they can't get rid of them in the camp, they start taking them on, especially in the East, death marches.
Right.
Literally taking, you know,
Hundreds
500 or
of-
600 people out and marching them, and if they fall out, they shoot them. Bataan Death March style.
Yes.
Or if they die on the way, well, they die
then
on the
that's
way.
just the way it is.
Until they get them to the next concentration camp.
And then you just move them further inward into the Germany and
Fortunately, this did allow several of them to escape.
correct.
Not enough to make a difference, but
No, but and I've read stories. I've heard from documentaries of individuals on these death marches of how they would just kind of, like you said, escape. They would run into barns and they would try to hide out. And again, at the same time as these Germans are marching these prisoners, for lack of a better term, prisoners from camp to camp, the Soviets are rolling in, and they start to see what's going on. And well,
they tell us, and of course, then we have our own evidence plus the aerial evidence, and it's something when it breaks. It doesn't cause this huge. It doesn't cause like this huge reaction like the rape of Nanking,
right?
Because again, it's too big. I think it's just so overwhelming and so unbelievable, which is one other reason I think there's so many Holocaust deniers today. Is there are people that couldn't have possibly happened?
How could more than 7? Okay, say the bigger number, 7 million individuals die.
Well, 11.
Right.
When you count
altogether.
all the different types.
Right. Altogether, yeah.
This was imagine if we go back to that from last time's talk about what happens if Hitler doesn't do the stand and fight, and the German generals get to do a defense by maneuver. How long does this war last?
True.
Because they don't lose Army Group Center. They don't lose the 17th Army. We'll assume the 6th Army is dead because that's just there.
You're right.
But that means they can afford more on the Western Front. So even if they have to retreat to the Rhine, the Allies aren't getting into Germany that soon because they have enough troops.
That's true.
What if this war lasts till 47 or 48?
We would see.
I mean, there probably wouldn't be too many Jews east of the Rhine.
Of course not.
They've been gone.
Right.
And probably not a whole lot. Well, Roma almost got extincted anyway.
Correct.
Can you imagine working at full tilt, which was, 2 million a year in 44, I think?
Yeah.
2 or 3 million in a year. Do that for another 3 years? Another 7 million people dead?
Yeah, you're seeing it's astronomical as the numbers would be.
Yeah, I mean, as horrifying as they are now, double them.
Right.
And just, whoa.
Yeah.
What do you have left?
Straggles of anyone.
You'd have these random little groups of Jews in Western Russia and hidden in Romania or Hungary. Because Hungary didn't participate in until 44, late 44, that they finally started agreeing to deport Jews. And it was haphazard, so because they didn't really care.
Right.
Italians never really went for
No.
the deportation of Jews. In the northern part, where the Germans had firm control for 2 years, that happened a lot more.
But when you get close to like Naples or any of the other places in the southern half, no.
And it wasn't like Italy was overrun with Jews. I mean, it's a very Catholic country at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I would, I would agree.
Yeah.
But again, it's just the idea of this. It's something that I don't. Do you feel we would ever see something like this happen again?
Oh yeah. I mean,
well, it's happening already.
Right. I mean, ask the Uyghurs in China.
Right.
Ask any opponents of Pol Pot. Ask the liberals and Amerasian children in Vietnam.
That's true.
I mean, well, ask the Tutsis.
Yep.
I mean, we don't have any. I mean, very few of those reach this level of industrialization. But that's because they don't happen. Other than now we have China, which we don't know what that's going to end up looking like.
True.
Are we going to see an entire ethnic group of people disappear?
Maybe.
So, unfortunately, man's penchant for barbarity towards his fellow man has not gone away. It's just we here in the West tend to think of it as in the past or somewhere else. And I think that's a very dangerous place to be.
Correct.
We can't let something like this happen again. But again, when you look at the history of Germany, especially, leading up to the rise of the Nazi Party, it's hard to see how that happened to begin with.
True.
So how do you stop it? Because it's not going to, history repeats, but it doesn't mean that the steps are the same. They
Right.
don't look exactly the same way.
Exactly.
So, unfortunately, I think we'll probably always end up in a reactive.
Yes.
It's going to start, people will recognize it for what it is, and then go.
Like case in point again.
I feel bad. Armenians, can't forget the Armenians.
Right.
So,
Right.
or the Kurds with Iraq. So,
Sure.
there's so many different groups that have been persecuted like that.
Correct.
To the point of extinction. Well, not extinction,
But close.
the concept that a government, not just
Right.
a group of people, but a government is actively seeking to exterminate them or drive them out at least.
Yes.
It's, yeah, it hasn't stopped because Hitler's dead.
Correct. Well, sorry to
bring us down.
leave you all on a somber note, but again, that's just, this is something that we feel we needed to explain and definitely examine, not for the death toll or anything along those lines, but the idea that this is something that, that we have to learn from.
We have to realize that not every political agenda is going to lead to this.
Correct.
But we do have to realize that it's not, we can't claim we're safe because Germany in the 1920s was one of the most liberally democratic countries in the world. I mean, it was kind of gloried in almost the sense that it had gotten rid of some of the militarism of the Prussian autocracy.
Correct.
Of before World War I, but they could revel in the cultural concepts of all the Germans that had gone before, the Beethovens and all those famous composers, the art and the writers. And then, a short decade, well, a long decade, 20 to 33. It's gone.
It's gone.
It's gone. You're now living in a barbaric regime that is industrializing death.
Correct.
I mean, if that doesn't scare you, really in any country,
Right.
that the people you see on the street could end up there in a decade is something you have to think about.
Right. That's true. Well, anyway, next week, I believe we're going to actually go and finish the war
I think
in
we're going to
Europe.
plant that flag.
Yep.
In Europe, obviously.
Correct, in Europe. And then we'll move on over into the Pacific, and we'll kind of do the same.
Yeah, I think we'll bring us up to the close of the war. There's a lot of good stuff that goes on
For sure.
that we need to see, because I think after we finish the war, the fighting, I think we're going to spend some time talking about all the things that have changed because of the war. Not
Right.
just,
Right.
obviously, Hitler's dead, Tojo's dead.
Right. But the
social and economic impact of the war is
correct.
huge.
Correct. And it leads into more problems that, well, we could discuss later on.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, there's an entire series that talks about World War II as Armageddon.
correct.
And it really was. The
Yeah, I
world
agree.
was utterly different after it was over.
I agree. Well, be sure to tune in, and hopefully you guys, again, give us a like, give us a share, follow us.
All right.